Alright, so this is section 1 of my video project. Now, basically we're going to be talking about the Millennial Development Goals. So to start off with, Goal 3, as we kind of mentioned in the intro, is to promote gender equality and empower women. Now, I think two of the biggest reasons this is an issue are because of education and culture. Now, in a lot of these developing countries, uh, women just don't get educated because they don't need it. If you think about it, men are the ones that hold property. They can vote. They have all of these things. They're the ones that work mostly in a lot of these cultures. And so why educate the woman? Why spend that time and take her out of home where she could be doing other things to educate her if she's not going to use it? That's definitely an idea we need to fix, I believe, in a lot of these cultures, and in a lot of these nations, and the second one is culture. Now, this is something that we can see all throughout history. I mean, um, the idea that women are valued as items, sort of. I mean, if you use an example that's you know uh, something I relate to, the movie Johnny Lingo. I'm sure some of us have all seen that, some of us maybe. But basically, it's an island culture, and this women are purchased really, and the common thing to purchase women is livestock. And there's this 8-cow woman that you can purchase. Anyways, just the idea of being able to purchase a woman just itemizes her. There's things in cultures as far as um, different families or different rather there's things in cultures where they have different things that they do. Women are there to just wash and to help and to take care of children. So breaking down these cultural um, barriers that limit what women can do is also something I think needs to be addressed when talking about this goal. Now, in relation to Suriname, education, they're not awful in their education, um, but I think one of the big deals has to do with their infrastructure and kind of just their geography. Um, Kind of most everyone is kind of in the northern side. The southern part of Suriname is a lot of trees and things like that, a lot of forestry. Now, but the roads are not very good. What roads there are have kind of been run down in their military rule. Nothing was taken care of. So the roads aren't very good. So that makes travel hard, to get to schools or however they have their education. But something also really interesting and I think unique to Suriname is this mesh pot of cultures that they have. Because when the Dutch colonized, they, of course, you had Dutch people, but then they brought slaves. So you have African people there, and they brought in workers from India. So you have this high concentration of African people, Indian cultures, and then the native, I believe they're called Suriname people as well, kind of people that are indigenous to that area. Now, what was I saying? Okay, so you have all of these cultures that are so very different. I mean, think of African culture, think of Indian culture. Just those two alone, so different, and so their cultural roles as far as how they respect women are going to be different. So to maybe in Suriname it wouldn't be so much as having a universal idea of what women's role should be or how they should be treated, but just making sure that they're treated at a certain standard. I mean, we don't have to generalize everything and say women need to have this, this, and this because it's going to change from culture to culture. So that's an interesting thing to look at here, just how these cultures affect how the women are treated. Now, the second millennial development goal, which that we're going to talk about, which is the fourth development goal, is reducing child mortality. Um, so a big deal with this is malnutrition and then lack of access to primary health care and infrastructure. So malnutrition, obviously, you can't, for one, it's you can't afford food, but for two, it's that the types of food you can afford aren't nutritious for you and aren't helping you. And then lack of access to primary health care infrastructure. Just a lot of the nations of the world in general, um, they just don't have these facilities to take care of the infants when they do get sick. And then in addition to that, finding people that can even help as far as physicians is also an issue that we'll actually see come into play in the next millennial development goal as well. Um, in Suriname, this definitely varies from area to area. Now, you kind of have this economic polarization in Suriname as well. You have people who are very affluent, and then you kind of have people who are not not as well off, and it kind of this is something I need to look into more to figure out where the discrepancy is, but it kind of has to do with this idea of cultures. Some cultures are doing better, and I believe from my research so far that it's the natives that are suffering more than some of the other cultures, those Suriname people. So that's something definitely that needs to be looked at here with Suriname. Um, I believe that their water condition is fairly decent. They do have a lot of access to water and things like that. Um, but a lot of it is going to be with improving infrastructure as far as healthcare, which is something that will be an issue because of how the government is run and how their economy is run. Um, and like I was saying, this is something that will come into play with 4 and 5 as far as Millennial Development Goals. Their government, just a little bit of background on that. Um, they have they have a um, well, they elected him, but basically he was put in when Suriname gained their independence from the Dutch. They fell into military rule. Um, and let me look up the name of the guy they were under. Um, okay, so they fell under military rule of a guy named Bouterse. Desi Bouterse. That's how I'm gonna guess it's pronounced because I have no idea. So they fell under the military rule, and definitely lots of corruption going on here. The Dutch ended up getting really mad, and like they ended up trying him for drug trafficking, things like that. So what happened is Suriname eventually put together a coalition, and they became a constitutional democracy and kind of voted him out, whatever. But then recently he has been voted back into power. So this has really influenced Suriname in a lot of different ways. Their economy hasn't been able to grow and progress because of this instability, and the corruption that's been in the government kind of seeded in and out throughout their existence as a nation. Um, so that's definitely leading to uh, lack of revenue to improve the infrastructure. Things like the roads, things like that. So it's definitely playing a big part in this lack of healthcare services for one, and also just uh, the ability to get to these facilities, which there aren't that many of. I believe there's like 5 hospitals in Suriname. So, and that's including like psych wards and things that wouldn't even be relevant to everyone. So there's lots of issues to look at there. Now, let's see here. Um, if you want to go to my website, I actually have this really cool link under um, under my Millennial Development Goals 3, 4, and 5, and then under Millennial Development Goal 4. It's a link that actually shows a comparison that I thought was kind of neat of the child mortality rate between Suriname and the United States, just kind of juxtaposing them. So that's kind of interesting. You can click and follow that link if you'd like. Okay, so Millennial Development Goal 5 is improving maternal health. There's basically 2 sections here as well. There's problems related to pregnancy and then lack of contraception. Now, most of the issues that happen during pregnancy and the deaths that result from them could be fixed if there were enough hospitals. Now, it's kind of twofold. If there was enough hospitals and if there was enough physicians who were able to help, who knew what they were talking about. Now, kind of as a side note, this made me think of all of the people that we sponsor as a nation to go into these developing countries and help on a healthcare level. I mean, we're helping them, but is it really fixing the problem, or is it just giving a temporary solution? So that's something to think about as well, because we want to help these people be able to be self-sufficient, I guess you could say, when it comes to healthcare. We need to not just give them a fish, but teach them how to fish. As far as the lack of contraceptions, as this idea of like family planning has kind of grown, the idea of um, and it's happened as child mortality rate has actually gone down. People feel the need to have less kids because less of the children are dying. Kind of a morbid thought, but true. And I actually have a link to a video that talks about that as well on my website if you'd like to go to that. It's under, let's see, it's under, I think it's under empowering women. I'll have to go and check. Let's see. Anyways, so as this idea of family planning has become more prevalent, contraceptions have been in higher demand, but a lot of these nations, they don't have access to them. Like, it's either going to be an issue of poverty, they're too poor to have them, or they just simply don't have a lot of options when it comes to contraception, which leads to dangerous abortions and just weird things that they try to do. Anyway, so there's a lot of issues there as well. Now, I believe I was reading something about how in the Millennial Development Goals page that contraception, like funding for contraception, has actually been cut back recently in like the last decade or so, which has led to higher rates of maternal deaths or lack of maternal health because they haven't had these contraceptions. So it's kind of interesting. I think they said that was funded on more of a global level. So even looking at something like that and saying, why have we cut this back if it's so important? Now, dealing with Suriname, once again, this is going to have a lot to do with the infrastructure of the country, lack of hospitals, lack of people who know what they're doing, but also government spending. So we're looking into the government and the economy as well, especially with a lot of the corruption that's going on. The debt level has risen in Suriname, and also government spending, things like that. So maybe finding a place in the government spending that would help with this issue. Okay, let's see here. So we need to fix some of these problems, of course. All problems would be preferable. So how serious are the general problems related to these goals? I would say some of the general problems we have, are the economy and the government and the infrastructure. Those cover our basics. They cover our health, which covers both improving maternal health and infant mortality, and then infrastructure plays, and government spending, and so all of these play huge things. Even with our first goal, which was empowering women, they don't have any ways to empower if they don't have the infrastructure and going with education, things like that. So they need facilities. So these are huge problems, especially when it comes to, if I was to focus on one problem that I think is probably the biggest that could, waterfall effect and help the other problems, it would be the government, because they just have so much corruption going on there. They can't fix everything else. I mean, the private sector is so diminished because of how much the government has their hand in everything. So I think stabilizing their government, improving their government is going to be a good place to start in order to improve in all of these areas. Long-term consequences if these problems don't change. Suriname's going to stay stagnant as a nation, if not get worse, because this has only been since 2010 that this dictator has been back in power. So what's going to happen the longer he stays in power? It just doesn't bode well for Suriname as a nation. We likely see, a decline in all of these development goal areas, because we're just going to have more corruption, which is going to affect the economy even more. Our infrastructure, it said specifically that the roads and some of the infrastructure has just not been maintained under military rule, and since he's a military dictator, odds are that will continue. So if these goals are not fixed, and if Suriname stays on the path they are now, it does not bode well at all for their future. So that's kind of where we're heading. Let's see. And we will talk more about some target goals and some target problems and how to fix these things in the next section.